Okay, we're good now. We're good. We're good. Okay, we are live and good. I think we have video. I think we have audio. And we're in 2 Samuel chapter 2. 2 Samuel chapter 2. So if you've been following this series, then you are fully aware of how fast things have progressed in the story. And so in chapter 2, we're going to get into some really, really good review. We're going to learn about some things that came up earlier. If you were with us in 1 Samuel, then we're going to touch on some of those things. Just to give you guys a recap, I know as you're going through a series, sometimes things seem so far away, like, wow, that was like 1 Samuel chapter 11. That was a long time ago. So we're going to kind of reintroduce some of the characters in our historical narrative this week. And I'm going to give you some background about just how powerful chapter 2 really is. Chapter 2 is a rather long chapter. It jumps between two major narratives, but they surmise the same. So the title of this week's lesson is Two Kingdoms. And what we're going to learn this week is the importance of choice, popular opinion, and following Yah. Following Yah. So last week we learned, we had the story of David and learning about the death of Jonathan, and he gives the eulogy, if you will, of Saul and of Jonathan. And we see everything kind of culminating based upon the events of 1 Samuel, and we're now moving into the second half of the narrative. So you can see how this is like one streamlined story. All right, let's start off with 2 Samuel chapter 2. I'm going to share my screen with you guys like we've done before so we can read along with each other, and then we will get into the bulk of the information for today. So for 2 Samuel chapter 2, and it came to pass after this. So after this was that we read last week. After this, that David inquired of Yahuwah. Let's just pause there. We're dealing with David in the context of his character. What we've seen from David consistently is that David has not been making moves without Yah. So this is a very important moment. Saul has passed, Jonathan has passed, and this big battle has happened. David is wondering now from Yah what to do next. It is so imperative that when major events happen that seem to be guiding us toward our purpose and our function, both as individuals and as a collective nation, that we and our leadership stop and ask, Yah, what's next? Because we can assume what next is. David has already been anointed. He has not yet been anointed king over Israel in the proper custom and tradition, but he has been anointed. So he could surmise that the next thing is, let's go up and seize the kingdom. But David doesn't go with what he thinks the natural chronological order of events should be after the death of Saul. He waits for Yah because he understands that everything that happens and that is happening is because Yah is orchestrating it. We are the servants of the Creator. And as the servants of the Creator, even though we may be given the plan, we have to constantly make sure that we are doing what's right in that moment, because we can have the big picture, but then the smaller intricate details play out in only a way that Yah knows and that Yah can tell us to move forward on. So it says, and it came to pass after this that David inquired of Yahuwah, saying, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? So he's like, can I go home? I've been gone for a long time. Like, is it safe for me to go home? And that is as disenfranchised people being separated through the transatlantic slave trade because of our disobedience to the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. and being generations removed, being in the land of our captivity, 400 years. I know a lot of us resonate with that question of, can I go home? Like, just, can I go home? And David asked this question, and that's such a heavy question because he's been running from his enemies, being persecuted by his enemies. Then he's had to live amongst his enemies. So kind of similar to us. You were captured by your enemies. You were persecuted by your enemies. Then after your enemy has been defeated, you're still in the land of your captivity. And the next question is, can I go home? And Yahuwah said unto him, go up. Said, go ahead. And David didn't just, hey, everybody, let's go. He was like, wait, I also need your blessing on this next part. And it says, and David said, whither shall I go up? And that, even saying it out loud right now, just hit me like a ton of bricks. We're in the land of our captivity. We know where home is, but then the real question is, but where should I go? Because right now we're in between. He knows, like, hey, Saul still has family. There's still 11 other tribes. There's all this stuff happening. If I'm getting the okay to move, where do I go? And right now, a lot of people are moving around in this world amongst our enemies and not knowing where to go. And so we go to the place that seems best to us, but we have to wait for Yah to give the cue of, well, where do I go? I know where home is, but even though he knew if he said, can I go up to the city of Judah? He had an idea of his mind where he probably wanted to go. But he goes ahead and asks Yah and says, well, whither shall I go up? And he said, this is Yah. Yah says, unto Hebron. Now, I've read over this, I know, at least once a day, every day this week, leading up to this point. And I'm looking and I'm going, I didn't stop at Hebron the first 6 times I probably looked at this, if not more, even, before this. And today Yah goes, ask why. And I'm like, okay, why Hebron? I'm gonna give you guys just a brief amount of history, our history, on the importance of Hebron and going to the place that Yah chooses, because he could have went anywhere, but Yah said Hebron. Before I go deep into that, let me show you where Hebron is, because it's very important to know where places are, especially as we are navigating through our history. Where things are is just as important as what a thing is or who someone is. So let me show you where Hebron is. And I don't know, can you guys see that? Let's make sure. Let me try one more time. Make sure I clicked on the right option. Okay, here we go. There it is. So this is just a rough map of the area during King David's time. And so right in here, where you see 1, this is Ziklag. This is where he is. And look where he's positioned. He's between Philistia, which is the land of the Philistines, and Edom, and the Edomites. And Ziklag is right in the middle. So he's in the midst, literally surrounded by enemies. And Judah is straight up ahead. And Hebron is like the next neighboring city next to the Valley of Salt and the Jordan River. So here you have Hebron. Just wanted to give you guys some context on where Hebron was. All right. So Yah tells David to go to Hebron. Hebron is currently in the West Bank territory of the land of Palestine. I just lost video. There we go. It's back. Okay, now. Perfect. Okay. So Hebron currently exists in the West Bank in the land of Palestine. It's so interesting today. I never have this many distractions and things come up, and we're working toward a wonderful end. So just bear with me. Just bear with me today. It's just one of those days where you get 50 million things that happens. And one of those things is an immense amount of distractions. Like my screen wants to cut out. It's fine. We're moving forward. All right. So David is told to go to Hebron. Hebron is in the West Bank and Palestinian territory still today. It's a very important place. So Hebron has deep cultural significance for Hebrews. Does anybody know why? I'll give you a second in the chat to kind of tell why Hebron is a very important place. I'll give you a hint. It's something that goes backwards, not something that moves forward. It's something in the past from where we're looking at where David is, it's past. So I'll give you guys a second and to think about that. If you didn't know, or if you haven't put in the chat yet, and if you did, Zeal, let me know which one of you guys came up with that, because that is really, really good biblical knowledge if you knew the significance of Hebron. Hebron is the city where Abraham purchased a burial space for Sarah. It later became the place of family burial and the family sepulcher. Tradition says that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives are all buried in Hebron. So why is Hebron significant outside of the fact that it was a burial space? Hebron was the first portion of land to ever belong to Israel in the natural and the legal sense within the territory of the promised land. Let's go back to that story. Okay, Zuri is the one who got it. So you just let me know. Zuri, that is amazing. Absolutely amazing. So in Genesis chapter 23, we're going to look through this story because this is very important to the background of where we're going and this idea of promise and place and knowing where to go and a specific place being set up. Genesis chapter 23 says, and Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. So 127 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Heth answered Abraham and said unto him, Hear us, my master. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury your dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar. So the humility, first of all, of Abraham. So he goes to Ephron, the son of Zohar, and he tells him to ask him, and so that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field, for as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. So he thought about it and he had a place. It's led to a place, Machpelah, that was in the possession of Ephron, the son of Zohar. Okay. Verse 10, and Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth. So all of this exchange is happening with witnesses. This is very important. And he says, even all that went into the gate of his city, everybody that was coming through heard this, saying, Nay, my master, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein. So he goes, not just the burial place, but you can have the field and the cave. And he says, bury thy dead. He was going to give it to him. And Abraham bowed himself before the people of the land. And he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, but if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, my master, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is it betwixt me and thee? He said, it's 400 shekels. What is that between you and me? Take the land. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver. He said, "There's a silver," which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth. It's a legal transaction, and everybody around is witnessing it, and it's recorded here before you. 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure. All of that stuff was given to Abraham. Unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went into the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried his wife, Sarah his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. This legal transaction of the first portion of land ownership amongst our people by our patriarch is recorded in history. And so when Yah tells David, go up to Hebron, the place is very specific. It's the place that marked the ownership of that land by Abraham. David couldn't have thought of that himself. He probably was like, let me go to Jerusalem, or let me go. He's like, no, here first. Go back all the way back to where things began. Here first. If you recall the story, the man tried to give the land to Abraham. And if you know anything about Abraham's character, if you read through Genesis, Abraham was not going to let anyone bless him but Yah. Had to be from Yah. Abraham had seen the land. Yah told him, everything you walk, that is going to be the land that your seed is going to inherit. And then Yah makes it sure by giving him just a glimpse and giving him a portion within that land. Okay, so this is the place that Yah sends David, is the place where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives are buried in that place. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Okay, let's get back to our story. Oops, share. All right. 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 2. So David went up thither, and his two wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, Nabal's wife, the Carmelite. I think it's important to note that it mentions Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. I was struggling with that ever since he married her. I'm like, why does it keep saying Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess? Because there's two Ahinoams. And that's why knowing lineage is important as we're reading, because you can kind of mix some things up. Saul also had a wife named Ahinoam. That was the mother of Jonathan. And Ahinoam the Jezreelitess is noted by Yah with extreme precision, because we don't want people to think that David married Jonathan's mama and David took her. So Ahinoam is given that name. I kept saying, like, I know why he mentions Abigail, Nabal's wife, so that when another Abigail comes along, he makes it sure, but why Ahinoam? Ahinoam is given her name in this fashion, so you don't misrepresent the character of King David, okay? So Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, Nabal's wife, so we remember that story. And his men that were with him did David bring up, every man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. So David did exactly what Yah told him to do. And the men of Judah came, and they anointed David king over the house of Judah. It's very interesting that David didn't go out and ask someone to anoint him king. David went exactly to the place where Yah told him to go. And when he got there, his brethren met him there. Now, the men of Judah anointing King David takes us back to a previous story as well. Let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 16. 1 Samuel chapter 16 is where David is anointed by Samuel. And we're going to look at who David was anointed by Samuel in front of and why this moment is the culmination of those moments. I'll also note that there's a large span of time between 1 Samuel 16 and 2 Samuel chapter 2. And oftentimes there is a process in the arrival at the place we're supposed to be at, and everything in between there and us arriving at our destination is heavily based in obedience. The motifs don't work if there's not obedience in between those segments. So when you're looking through scripture and you're reading, Yah has a plan, but the person and their obedience is very, very important to these things coming around full circle. If David had not asked, what if he said, I want to go up into the territory of the Benjamites? Then how would that have looked? There would have been probably battle and war and contention. He goes up into an area amongst his own people, and the people respond to him the way that they're supposed to. Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 16. And Yahuwah said unto Samuel, how long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? So now we get all the way back. Saul's rejected. Let's just move forward. It's a lot. He said, fill your horn with oil and go, and I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king amongst his sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And Yahuwah said, take a heifer with thee and say, I am come to sacrifice to Yahuwah, and call Jesse to the sacrifice. And I will show thee what thou shalt do, and thou shalt anoint unto me him who I name unto thee. Look at the parallel. David is in Ziklag. He wants to go home. Where do I go? Samuel, mourning over Saul being rejected over king. Yah says, get up. I have a king. Take your oil. I'm going to tell you who to anoint. This picture of obedience that David he's learned, first of all, he didn't just draw it from nowhere, has learned is echoed. And so it's almost like we can look at 1 Samuel 16 and 2 Samuel chapter 2 and see like what would have happened with all this stuff in between, as David had to become the king. He didn't just become king at this moment. He was anointed at this moment, but his obedience of being anointed led to the moment of him being anointed king. If he would have been anointed and then been disobedient, that moment would have never come. That moment would have never come. And that's so important for us. Being Israel, being Israelites is not enough. The obedience leads to the moment of being recognized as who we are. And the story is so important to that major theme. Okay, so he tells him how to go up because, Saul was we already know Saul. Verse 4, and Samuel did that which Yahuwah spake and came to Bethlehem, house of bread. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming and said, comest thou peaceably? And he said, peaceably, I am come to sacrifice unto Yahuwah. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass that when they were come, that he looked on Eliab and said, surely Yahuwah's anointed is before him. But Yahuwah said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For Yahuwah seeth not as a man seeth. For man looketh at the outward appearance, but Yahuwah looketh at the heart. We're going to just briefly go back to the title, because the title is Two Kingdoms. And today in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at choices, and the choices of the past, the choices of our ancestors and their lived experiences, and the choices that we have to make today, and the choices that the nations around us are going to have to make. So really, really soak in all of this, because I'm reading back through this to really give you context of where we're moving forward to. He says, man looks on the outward appearance, but Yahuwah looks on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, neither hath Yahuwah chosen this. Then Jesse made Shammah to pass, and he said, neither hath Yahuwah chosen this. Again, Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel. And Yah said, I haven't chosen any of these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, are here all of thy children? And he said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. Now imagine this. The 7 brothers are passing before Samuel, and each of them know that they're not the one that's chosen. They're not the one. And so they wait. And he sent and brought him, and now he was ruddy and with all of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look at. And Yahuwah says, arise, says to Samuel, arise and anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the spirit of Yahuwah came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. He arose, he anointed him in the midst of his brethren. Let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 2. Verse 3. And he and his man that were with him did David bring up every man with his household, and they went into the cities of Hebron. Verse 4. And the men of Judah came, and they anointed David king over the house of Judah. Exactly what happened. They did not forget that moment. David comes from the tribe of Judah. He and his brothers and his family. They knew from that time that he was anointed, but it wasn't until the fullness of time for the father that the permission and the place was given for David to be anointed king. It didn't take a conversation. It didn't take a vote. It didn't take asking 50 million people. When David arrived back in Hebron, King Saul is now dead. They knew not to look to anyone else but who Yah had anointed, literally over 10 plus years ago. They came and they anointed him king. And they told David, saying that the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. So, they're there. It's just like that thing we do when you get around family. We have these grandiose pictures, I think, of a lot of the biblical the conversation in our head, but they anoint him king. They probably celebrate. It's great. And then they're talking, and they said, he's giving them the run. They're probably giving the rundown of like, man, what happened when I was gone? What happened with this? What happened with that? Okay, tell me about the battle. I heard this from, the Amalekite, but you guys give it to me, right? They're filling in the blanks. And so they told David, they said, man, the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. Do you guys remember who the men of Jabesh Gilead are? I'll give you a second. While I'm giving you guys a second for that, let's just stay right here at David being anointed king and rest on this point when it comes to the Messiah. And we will continue to rest on points that come to the Messiah in this context, because they are so imperative to the motif and the culmination of the picture and the blueprint that Yah allows David to lay for the Messiah, Yah's beloved. Many people, when they go through history, have an issue with the Messiah because as soon as he came, people didn't anoint him king, right? When the Messiah comes, everybody was so baffled. They're like, okay, this is the Messiah. This man, he's the one. Why is he not overthrowing the system? Why is he not coming through and kicking Herod off the throne and dispelling the Romans? But when you see and you understand scripture and the context that things are laid out in, before David became king, he was anointed. But he had a long process of development that happened that was imperative to his leadership. The Messiah has that same exact process. He was born king, right? Just like David was anointed young before his brothers. But it wasn't until the fullness of time that he is given the kingship and the ability to rule. Well, when we're reading through scripture, not just here in 2 Samuel, but all the way through the Tanakh, you'll see that there is a specific time with that, there's a specific order of events and things that have to happen in the world before the reign and the ruling of our king over this world. There is a perfect storm, a perfect time for that to happen. It's a process. The dismantling of one kingdom has to happen to make room for the establishment of Yah's kingdom and his anointed. See that same thing with David. He was anointed, but Yah had to dismantle the ruling and the kingship of Saul because of Saul's disobedience. Same is true with the Messiah. He comes into the world to first redeem Israel. Because when it comes to the dismantling of this world's kingdom, if we don't have a Messiah, if we don't have an example, and if we don't have a focal point, then guess what? We will be dismantled in that same process. I know there are people out there that struggle with this idea of a Messiah and who the Messiah is. And in the next coming weeks, during the week, not on our Shabbat lesson, but during the week, we're going to cover extensively that information. I believe it's imperative, and I believe the time has come for us to have that discussion and put forth that information so it gives you something to think about. But I will tell you this, nothing about our captivity and nothing about our disenfranchisement and nothing about our redemption makes sense without the Brit Kadashah or the New Testament narrative. Because it would leave, one, such a huge gap in who we are and where we come from. And a lot of the time, it's that gap that the world has chosen to dismiss, and different religious groups have chosen to dismiss, whether it's Jewish people, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Yah only, Hebrews, or whomever, have chosen to dismiss that narrative because it gives a direct link between the Old Testament and the current testament. I know this is going to be hard to understand, but you are living the New Testament. The New Testament has not concluded. With the New Testament doesn't conclude based upon prophecy until the end of the book of Revelation, when Yah says, Amen. Like, that's it. So that period, this period of time that we're living in, is still a process of the unfolding of prophecy. And so if we don't understand our history in the context of the Brit Kadashah, in the context of, the Romans coming in and sacking Jerusalem and us being dispersed and pushed into parts of Africa and then being taken on slave ships and brought here, if that portion of history is omitted, then you can have a people group stand in the gap and war and argue about who is true Israel. Rejecting the testament and rejecting our Messiah leaves us also rejected, because there's no natural reason why we are in the land of our captivity. After the Maccabean period, why are we here? What did we do to get here? You don't have an answer. And there's no historical narrative about the Hebrews that gives that answer. The only historical narrative that we have that gives the answer for why we were sorely punished and put into captivity for 400 years, echoing the words of Yah to Abraham about being in a strange land with strange people and being sorely afflicted for 400 years, and then also echoing Deuteronomy 28 of being taken into ships. The only way that narrative flows is the context of us rejecting our Messiah and his arrival coming, and us not being like, the sons of Judah in this context and anointing our king. No, our king was anointed with a crown of thorns and was beaten and scourged and put on a tree and hung, motif, just like our men and women have been done in this country, and ridiculed and blasphemed against. And everything about our existence echoes the same thing that happened to him. That's why we are here today. That's why we're not in our land. And that's why we're asking, when do we get to go up? That needs to be fully noted, because our history doesn't make sense when you take out chunks. Just because you don't understand something, that's not Yah's problem. That's our problem. And it's our problem to get it right. So we're going to work on that. Okay, so the dismantling of one kingdom and the establishment of another. Yehoshua goes through the same process. Born king, disenfranchised. There's a ruling, system in place that instead of him being able to be king, now he has to hide in Egypt, and now he has to live lowly because he actually was the rightful king to the throne at that time, and John the Baptist was actually the rightful high priest at that time, and that's why their relationship is so important to know. And that's why knowing our history and our Bible from cover to cover is so important to know, because those little nuances are all through there. And that's what makes the narrative work, and it makes it infallible, and it makes it stand up against time. You don't think that, only Hebrews and Jews and Jewish people are the only people who have come against this book. The issue with the book is that it's so perfect when you run it from end to end that nobody's been able to dispel it. Because if they could have, believe me, they would. It would have taken nothing. If it was so easy, this thing would have been put up into smoke a long time ago. But the more it's dug in and the more it's searched and the more the biblical prophecies begin to play out, you can't deny the validity of the information held in the text. So Messiah has a wilderness journey just like David. And then he does the service of the kinsman redeemer, When he dies on the tree, he says, in Christianity, you guys probably know, testelestai. But really what he said is, I have paid for my bride in full. That it's finished has a root chala, and it's idea of paying for a bride with a dowry. And so when the bride is paid for in full with his blood, that's Acts 20 and 28, then he goes to prepare a place based upon the historical context of our people. And the bride, us, still has work to do. We go through a purification process so that when the bridegroom comes, he can find his bride, us, without spot or wrinkle. That makes sense. So everything that happens has to be related back to that context. And when we look at King David and the similarities, it shows us in just his life how each of those portions are played out. Comes as a kinsman redeemer. And now we wait for our king to be crowned and for us to stand with him as his bride. Hope that makes sense. Okay, to the men of Jabesh Gilead. I know I'm giving you guys a lot of history. We're moving literally back and forth, but I think what the Most High wants us to see is that this is not a book that can be broken up, just like our history can't be broken up. How you can't pull out the pieces you like and discard the pieces you don't. It all has to flow together because the story and the narrative is imperative to our redemption and to the culmination of all the events and all the atrocities that we've experienced as a people. All right, so we have these men of Jabesh Gilead, and David sends a message to them. So who are the men of Jabesh Gilead? So there's a long history between the men of Jabesh Gilead and the Benjamites. Saul is a Benjamite. You can find that information in Judges chapters 19 through 21. Saul in 1 Samuel 11 leads an attack on Amman in defense of Jabesh. If you don't remember this story, this is the story where the men of Jabesh come up. They are Amman comes, the men of Amman come, and the men of Jabesh say, look, don't destroy us, we'll serve you. And he goes, you know what? You know how you can serve me? I'll let you serve me if you pluck out your right eye. Like, wow, it's harsh. And so they're like, give us a minute. So they send out messengers, and the messengers go out to see if they can find somebody to fight for them, because they were like, we can't beat them. And so this is an ode to Saul for sure, that David even speaks to the men of Jabesh Gilead, and they create this bond. Because Saul, then a Benjamite, and knowing the history between the men of Jabesh and the Benjamites, says, we're going to go, wait, nobody wants to fight for you? You've gone to all the other tribes and all the other heads, and nobody's going to fight for you. I'll fight for you. So the question is, and I don't know if any of you guys remember this, why would the other tribes have like a little about the men of Jabesh and a little about the men of Benjamin? Well, remember in Judges, when the 11 tribes of Israel went out to literally destroy the Benjamites. They went out and the men went up to kill them. And they killed all but 600 men of Benjamin in order to not fully wipe them out. But then they also made a treaty or a pact to not let any of their daughters marry the children of Benjamin. And so Jabesh was the only group of people, the only unit who didn't go up to battle with the 11 tribes against the Benjamites. And so what they did is they went in and they killed up all the people in Jabesh except for 400 virgins. And so the 11 tribes decided they're going to take the 400 virgins and give them to the sons of Benjamin. So when Saul comes down, he's like, you know what? Enough is enough. So he takes 12 oxen and he slays them and chops them up and sends pieces out. This is in 1 Samuel 11 to all of the tribes and said, if you guys don't go up and fight with me against Amnon, I'm going to do this to all of y'all. Well, guess what? Everybody showed up. 300,000 men and 30,000 men of the children of Judah showed up that day, and they beat Amnon and his men. And at that moment, the men who were with Saul said, you know, we should just kill up everybody who said you weren't supposed to be king in the first place. And that was a moment that the people knew that Saul was definitely their king, and all the people came together in a consensus and united. So it wasn't just Saul being king over the Benjamites, but then Saul became king over all of Israel at that moment. So you can see that David sees this as a highlight, first of all, of the unification of Israel. And he understands that his job is not to have a grudge against anybody, not Saul, not anybody, but his job is the unification of Israel. And if he's going to be a king, and like Yasser, he's one better than you, but if he's going to be a great king, he has to unify Israel. And it can't be by holding grudges based upon his own issues with people. So it says, verse 5, and David sent messengers unto the men of Jabesh Gilead and said unto them, blessed be ye of Yahuwah, that ye have showed this kindness unto your master, even unto Saul, and have buried him. And now Yahuwah show kindness and truth unto you. And I will requite thee. It means I will give you this kindness because you have done this thing. Therefore, let your hands be strengthened and be ye valiant, for your master Saul is dead. And also the house of Judah have anointed me king over them. So he's saying, we're going to squash all the history and all the negative, and we're going to come together. And because you guys have shown yourself valiant, I'm coming to you first. Like, let's join together. You guys have done a righteous thing. So it's like, okay, things are looking up. Things are definitely looking good. Then verse 8 happens. But Abner, the son of Ner, captain of Saul's host, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim and made him king over Gilead and over the Asherites and over, this is like it says Jezreel, but it's really Yizareel, but it's not Israel, and over Ephraim and over Benjamin and over all Israel. Ain't that something? Yah's doing this thing over here, right? He's establishing his people. He is gathering them back together. He is making it known that that David is king. Judah anoints him. Fourth tribe, Judah, supposed to be king, goes all the way back to Genesis and what Jacob said would be. He said that Judah is supposed to be king. He's going to rule over his people. So following in the way of the ancestors, our people are trying to get it back together. And then Abner. There will always be someone or someone's resistant to the ways of Yahuwah. We live in a world where people would rather choose their own leader than go with the one that Yah has chosen because it gives them power and control. Holy. Okay, so he made him king over Gilead and over the Asherites and over Jezreel and over Ephraim and over Benjamin and over all Judah. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel and reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So the kingdom split. We have two kingdoms. We have pretty much all of Israel and then Judah. That's it. So the kingdom is split. Okay. People have been bent out of shape about the forthcoming information, which shouldn't be hidden information, but it is, about who the so-called Black people are and them being the descendants of the biblical Israelites. Just completely bent out of shape. It's like the worst thing that could ever happen in the world, I guess, for people. Some may even ask, and have asked, based upon that truth, what difference does it make? And aren't we all God's children? The difference is imperative. If we choose the wrong people, then we choose the wrong king. The world is split right now, and it's very, very disappointing. But it's prophecy, so it has to happen. And you have the whole world, right, rallying behind one group of people. And you have a small group of people coming to the knowledge of who they are as a people. And the whole world telling that group of people, shut up. The majority is over here. What Abner does is so interesting when we look at today's time. Abner says, look, we got clout over here. We got Saul used to be king. Ishbosheth is his son. We don't even know how Ishbosheth is still alive. I mean, he wasn't out there defending his father and dying like the rest of his brothers, right? He could have been out to battle, but we don't really fully get that narrative. All we know is he's alive, and him and one other brother, and 4 of the others are dead, okay? So we're looking at this, and you have everyone who's like, okay, the natural succession should be that Saul was king, so Ishbosheth should be king. But nobody cares about what Yah has. Nobody has asked Yah what to do. Now over here, you got Judah and David, and they're like, this is supposed to be the king. It's happened to me more than once, and I know it's probably happened to a bunch of you. When you share with people the information in scripture, they go, well, my pastor doesn't teach that. Well, I didn't learn that in school, and I've been to college. I've been to seminary. I didn't learn that. And you're looking, you're going, wow. So, okay, this is a perfect example how the majority can be completely wrong. The majority of the children of Israel chose to go with Ishbosheth after the death of Saul and made and anointed him king without the blessing or without inquiring of Yah. And a small remnant of people chose to go with the one that Yah had anointed king and to inquire of him of who he should be. And guess what? The small remnant was right and the majority was wrong. The majority chose a king, and in the process of choosing a king, they went against Yah. I said this before, and I'm going to say it again because I think it should be said in this moment. The issue with not knowing who Yah's people are, or choosing a people because of fear of what other people will say if you don't choose that people, or choosing a people because that's who the majority of people say that the chosen people are, is going to lead to a major problem. And that major problem is a Messiah is coming. I said a because 2 are coming. There's going to be one that is going to be the Antichrist. It doesn't mean anti meaning opposite. It means the counterfeit, where you will have all the fixing and trimmings, but something's going to be a little bit off. And he's going to begin to do things, and the majority of people are going to accept him and are going to rally behind him. The second is going to be the true Messiah. And the vast majority of people are going to reject him and are going to war against him, and he's going to be the real one. The reason why this is the issue, especially when it comes to race, because right now, a lot of the reasons why people have an issue with the so-called Black people being the Israelites of the Bible and claiming that heritage is because of white supremacy and racism. Because I cannot believe that the niggas, I said it without the other part, just so the children can still watch, that those people cannot be Yah's chosen people. Look at them. And you say, look at them, like the look at them is not what you have contributed to do to them. The look at them is because of systemic racism. The look at them is because of your mishandling of the word and thinking, causing them to think that they can reject the word of their Elohim and have liberty in your Christ. The look at them. But then you take another group and you say, but look at them. The same reason why people claim anti-Semitism is the same reason why people also follow the Jewish people. People follow the Jewish people because they're successful. People follow the Jewish people because they look like they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They have the land of Israel, which is the most prime historical real estate in the world. It's Israel, for crying out loud. So yes, every group has people who are not rich. Every group has people who are disenfranchised, but as a whole, nobody in the world looks at Jewish people and says, look at them. They're not God's chosen people. They hate them because of who they claim to be, but they don't reject the reality of who they say they are. But when you look at Israel, you go, I'm not following a people who don't have a pot or a window. I'm not following a people who sag their pants and do all the things that prophecy says that they would be. So you have a choice, and you're looking at the people and you're making a choice based upon the people, but you're not making a choice based upon the reality of Scripture and the reality of the propaganda that has been played out in the minds of people over the last 1,000 or 2,000 years. The image of the Messiah has been changed. I don't accept any image that we see because we don't know what he looks like. But what we do know is that he was not Caesar or Caesar Borgia. We know that to be 100% true. We know that he was not white. We know that he did not have blonde hair and that he did not have blue eyes. It's not anything against people that have blonde hair and blue eyes, because there are so-called Black people with blonde hair and blue eyes who can pass for white. So it's not a comment of race or skin color. It's a comment of reality based upon how he is painted to look based upon the Scriptures. Skin like burnt brass, hair like wool. It has to be first concrete before it can be allegorical. So yes, we can give allegorical meaning to those images, but are there people with hair like wool and skin like burnt brass? Absolutely yes. So it's not something that is in a far stretch of the imagination. And then when you do that and you choose a people, everybody rallies behind a people, mainly due to white supremacy against Black people or the disenfranchised, or the so-called Negro, who are also Israelites. When you do that, then guess what? When the Messiah comes, what do you think? What do you all think? What do you think? What do you think the Antichrist is going to look like? My guess is that he's going to look a little like those pictures we've seen. Kind of wavy hair, maybe a beard, maybe, right? And he's going to represent those of whom the world has deemed to be the only ones left of the tribes of Israel. What do you think the real Messiah is going to look like? He's going to look like everything that everyone despises. He's going to look like exactly what Scripture says he looks like. And who, based upon images that have been put into the people's minds, when the Jewish people choose their Messiah, the rest of the world is going to follow suit. That's what's going to happen. It is not going to matter. It's not going to matter what Yah said in his word. When they choose, because the world respects their choice, And when they choose one, it's going to fit into the natural way that they have positioned your minds to lean. That is why it makes a difference. That is why it makes a difference. They reject the one of this book, and they're going to choose one that fits their narrative, and the majority of the world is going to choose with them. When the world chooses a king, and when the world chooses a people, or when the world chooses anything, they do so because it gives them power. If we chose the wrong people, then we're going to choose the wrong king. When we choose our own king, we do so for power. When Yah chooses his leader, he does so for the sake of his name and for the redemption of his people. It's not for power and ruling. When the Antichrist comes, he's going to be chosen because of power and leadership position. When Yah chose to come and use himself as his salvation, he does so for his namesake and as an accusation against everyone who said that his law and his ways were devoid. This is why. The world has chosen the chosen, and in the process has sought to disenfranchise Yah's elect. Abner puppeteers Ishbosheth and gets everybody else on board against Yah's elect. They may have numbers and they may be more in popular opinion, but having numbers and popular opinion does not make something right. And you cannot allow numbers and popular opinion to force you to shut up or choose against Yah. Ishbosheth and Abner had 11 tribes on their side, and David had Judah, but David was right. The choices of men have no bearing on the reality of Elohim. The revelation of who was right was not David's business, but it was coming in due time. Let's continue. Verse 12. Oh, and let's just say that literally lasted for 7 years and 6 months. I think that's quite interesting as well. And Abner, the son of Ner, the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. And Joab, so now Abner, son of Ner, and Ishbosheth and his men are on the side. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met together by the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, the one on the one side and the one of the other side of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men now arise and play before us." So neither, see this, right? You have two different sides. And the leaders of the captain of the army are here without their kings. And they're saying, hey, let's let the men fight. Yeah, I didn't tell anybody to fight. I don't see Yah being inquired of here at all. Battling against brethren when David's over here trying to bring peace and bring balance and let Yah do his work. Very interesting. So Joab says, "Let them arise." Then there arose and went over by number 12 of Benjamin, which pertained to Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. And they caught every one his fellow by the head and thrust his sword through his fellow's side. So they fell down together. Wherefore the place was called Helkath Hazarim, which is in Gibeon. And there was a very sore battle that day, and Abner was beaten. So the side with Saul was beaten. And the men of Israel with them before the servants of David. And there were 3 sons of Zeruiah there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was light of foot as a wild roe. It meant that boy, he was like Usain Bolt. He could run. And Asahel pursued after Abner. Abner's a captain over what used to be Saul's army, but now Ishbosheth's army. And in going, he's running, and he turned not to the right or to the left. He is zoomed. He doesn't care about nobody can catch me anyways, right? It's like a running back. I'm got tunnel vision. I'm after you. And so he is following after Abner. Now we know from previous stories that the men that were with David were some straight warriors. He had to many times, hey, man, calm down. Wait a minute. We're gonna go do that like this. They now, this is the manner of warriors that were rolling with David. So Asahel's after Abner. Abner is he is not soft. He is to be feared. Abner's a bad dude. Okay, let's just let that be known. Abner's not running because he's scared. We're going to figure that out. So then Abner's also running. So Abner's quick. And he looks behind him and he sees Asahel. And he says, art thou Asahel? Remember, they all know they're brothers. We have to remember that they're brothers or family. And he goes, and they're running, mind you. So not only were they fast, but in shape. I had a running coach once tell me, he said, when you're running, your pace is the pace that you can run at and have a conversation. So if you're laboring, slow down, run comfortably, you can run further distance. Asahel is running, pursuing somebody. So he's not just trotting, he's running. And they're talking. He's like, aren't you Asahel? And he was like, I am, right? And Abner said unto him, turn aside to thy right or thy left and lay hold of one of the young men and take his armor. He's like, hey, okay, you want to fight? Get some armor, man. Like, so honorable. He's like, he already knows in his mind, like, Asahel, you young, I can kill you in 2 seconds. Get some armor, don't chase me, fight me like a man. But Asahel wouldn't turn aside. He's like, man, if I turn around and fight you right now, it's not even gonna be fair. Grab some armor, little homie. Okay, you want to fight? Because I think in my mind, based upon just the context we get, Abner was just gonna spank him a little bit. Like, I'm gonna just, like karate movie where they get you and they just like tap you and they cut you here and they tap you until he's just like really, really wounded. I don't think that Abner meant to kill Asahel. And we're going to see that right now. So verse 22, and Abner said again to Asahel, turn thee aside. Hey, man, stop following me. Turn thee aside from following me. Why should I have to smite you to the ground? Why should I kill you? So now he's warning him, like, look, if you keep chasing me, I'm going to kill you. Stop. Turn aside. It's not worth it. He said, because, and the reason why, he says, how should I show up my face to Joab, thy brother? He's like, how I'm gonna look your brother in the face if I kill you? Man, go. Like, just go. I'm letting you go. Just leave. Howbeit, he refused to turn aside. Wherefore Abner, so he has a sword in his hand. He had a sword. So, a sword has the sharp end on this side, and on the end, it's like a blunt end, like it's like a sword, right? So Abner, with the hinder end of his spear, boom, hit him under the 5th rib. So it's like almost to knock the wind. I'm gonna knock the wind out of him, and then I'm just gonna keep going. But when he hits him, right, the spear, then the backside of the spin, the blunt end of the spear comes out behind him, and he fell down there and died in the same place. So Abner's running, right, and he's like, he getting close. I just told him to, and he goes like this to just like. And it's almost like some centrifugal force. It's like one coming this way, the other coming that way, and it just hits him. And the back end of the spear comes out under his 5th rib. And he fell down there and he died. So he was just trying to if you were trying to kill him, he hit him and he died. Joab also and Abishai pursued after Abner, and the sun went down. So then they start coming after him, right? And the sun went down when they were come to the hill of Amman, and that lieth before Gilead by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. So they pushed them back into their territory. And the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together after Abner and became one troop. So now it's this whole group against, these few that came out with Joab. And then Abner called to Joab and said, shall the sword devour forever? Knowest thou not that it will be bitterness in the latter end? How long shall it be then, ere thou bid the people return from following their brother? And he's like, when are you going to tell them to stop coming after me? Are you just going to keep letting them kill each other? Which is really interesting because, you know, they started it. You called them out here to fight. And then now you want to say, no. Okay, now let's stop. That issue of pride created now death, first of all. Going before Yah creates death, and now it's creating this huge discord. And now Joab making sport or playing and letting these 12 men fight, and some of them die, now has lost his own brother. And Joab said, as Elohim liveth, unless thou hast spoken, surely then in the morning the people had gone up, every one from following his brother. And so he listens. He's just like, you know what? Okay, you said it. We're gonna stop. And Joab blew the trumpet, and all the people stood still and pursued after Israel no more. Neither fought they anymore. And Abner and his men walked all that night through the plain and pressed over Jordan and went through Bithron, and they came to Mahanaim. So they went back home. So interesting. All of this, and then horn blows, and it's just nothing. And they walk off. And Joab returned from following Abner. When he had gathered all the people together, there lacked of David's servants 19 men and Asahel, so 20 men, and specifically Joab's brother. But the servants of David had smitten of Benjamin and of Abner's men, so that 360, so 360 men died. So David's men definitely were in the win in this situation. He lost 20, but he lost his brother. What does it matter if you killed 360 men and you lose your own, right? And so they took up Asahel and buried him in the sepulcher of his father, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men went all night, and they came to Hebron at daybreak. When Joab went to fight with Abner, without Yah's consent, he lost his brethren. And even though he won a small battle, he lost his brother and his brethren. And the tension, we're going to see it in chapter 3, is not going to dissipate. The tension is not going to dissipate literally until Yah joins the kingdom. Warring amongst ourselves and warring when Yah is establishing his way and his righteousness is not going to help the situation. Yah is going to join the kingdom. And I think the issue that we have as a people right now, and we all have to come to this place, and this is now for us too, maybe for them as well, is that we think Yah is just going to do a little bit and then the rest is our job to do. And Yah's like, no, I got the whole thing. I got the whole thing. And so our impatience causes us to cause unnecessary tension, to stir the pot with our own hands, messing up the finished product. Yah is going to, it has not only authored our redemption, but he has stamped the seal of approval on the end result of it. And everything in between is his business. And our only business in between is obedience. When we take stuff into our own hands, we cause unnecessary nonsense. Unnecessary nonsense. Take this as a lesson that you can win a small battle being right, but the larger battle is won being righteous. Scripture tells us that Yah has the final say, one, on our king, on our redemption, and on the revelation of who we are. Our job is to be like David. Show up in the place that he's told you to be. Be who he's told you to be, and he will have the people who are supposed to, the remnant, will rally around that. Everybody else is not our business. We want those who, and we'll find this out in chapter 3 and 4, who already know who we are, to tell the masses who we are so we can stand and be proud of who we are. That's not the reason why Yah made us a nation. It's not the reason why Yah made David king. Yah didn't make David king so people could sing songs about David. Yah made David king so David could stand in front of Yah's enemies and declare the righteousness and justness of Yah. Our job as Israelites is not so we can say, and we're the chosen, and we can walk around here in pomp and circumstance and say, yes, and we have the land, and we have this, and now you must listen to us. Because honestly, who's going to listen to us when we can't even get our own Messiah right? Who's going to listen to us when we can't even decide how to say Yah's name and can't decide on what day to meet on? There's so much confusion. Yah doesn't, the masses don't need to have the light shed on us, because in the process of doing so, will deter the rest of the world at this point. Our job right now is to get it together, to unify little by little with the remnant, and let the other 11 and the other tribes and everybody else figure it out. Those of us who understand how imperative it is for us to be who we are, not to argue with rabbis, not to argue with other groups and other religions, not to try to dispel the reality of other people, you'll find yourself in a whole lot of trouble trying to get in Yah's business. You don't know who all the Jews are. You're just as bad as everybody else saying it's just us. No, you don't know. So your job is, you know who you are, be you. And let Yah continue to wake up everybody else. And when it's all said and done, he will be the one to rectify the issue. But if we try to pick these little battles like Joab and Abner did, then yeah, you'll have a little victory, and yeah, your name will buzz in the news, and yeah, there'll be stuff said here and there. But the overall issue of unification is going to be watered down. Because now how do we unify when you killed 360 of my brethren? Now we got other tensions going on. And now how is Joab going to feel about Abner now that he killed his brother? Now there's internal conflict. We have to stay focused. Stay focused, and the focus, our eyes should be fixed on Yah. Inquire of Yah before we open our mouth, before we speak. Because it's not that we have not been given the power to do so, but it has to be toward unification. There's been enough disunification that we have to understand it is not necessary for us to do the work of trying to redeem ourselves, but for us to settle in into who we are, walk in the obedience to the Creator and his law, statutes, and commandments, to raise our children in righteousness, to mind our own business, and to await our redemption. That is what it's about. It's not about being right. It's about being righteous. Shabbat shalom.